1920s and get into a little bit in depth here. And let me just start and kind of just keep on going. Yes, sir. You have nothing. All right. So where do I start? I just want to apologize for the red line there. As you can tell, I am recording all this, so hopefully it can be used in some future capacity. But one of the things we saw in the video on Monday. I'll wait if you guys have some conversations you want to finish. Is that okay? Okay, thanks. Age of prosperity, question mark. All right. One of the things about the 1920s is that there's a lot of things going on, and it's very often confusing because there's so much happening in this decade. And so I don't want you to be too confused. I just want you to understand that it's almost like a weird science experiment. There's a lot going on. There's cultural things here, there's racial things, there's conflict, there's all kinds of stuff. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But I think just a number of points to bring up. In the video the other day, on Monday, one of the key points was economic expansion. In the 1920s, the economy just booms, okay? On the surface though, okay? Like production of goods, called the gross national product, is at an all-time high in the 1920s. The number of millionaires goes up by 400%. Part of that has to do with some of the government's tax policies. Thank you. And basically, on the surface, it feels like the post-war, World War I, post-war, that's what I mean, the economy is doing super well, okay? And it's almost like a replay of the Gilded Age in a lot of ways. Now, the reason I put a question mark up here is because you gotta wonder though, because I'm gonna talk about some underlying problems. Now, there's a picture of a nice little millionaire there. That looks just like the Monopoly guy, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, he's spitting image right there. One thing that's also happening in the 20s is the economy is gradually shifting to a mass production type of economy, a manufacturing economy, where lots of things are being produced in factories more than ever before, even more so than during the Gilded Age. And so you're looking at a very high percentage of our economy that is a manufacturing base. And really, to be honest with you guys, America, when you compare it to other countries' economic output at this time, it's pretty good. Like, we're not number one yet, but we're high up there. Everything's functioning on all cylinders, so to speak. Why? Because a lot of the companies are using this thing called the assembly line. As you guys, I think, know what that is. The assembly line being something where everybody is working to produce something and everybody gets a job and everybody does a little bit of things. Like, for example, the Ford Motor Company is really good at this kind of work. Also, you could say in many other industries too, but that tends to be what's going on at this point. And so everything's ramping up, everything's doing well. The 1920s, and there's some nice little pictures of some assembly lines from the 1920s. In the top right-hand corner, you can see that's the Ford Motor Company up there in Detroit. And you know, you can clearly see that everybody has a job to do. Everything is regimented and very. If you remember, like way back earlier on in the semester, we talked about Taylor and Taylorism. This whole idea of basically everybody just doing a little part. So hopefully, not to be too redundant with that, but that's what it is. The 20s is also just really the time period where we have the beginning of more and more of an investment in the car and in the automobiles. And one of the things they talked about in the Century video, thank you, is pretty much that the government, for the first time in American history, is spending billions of dollars on roads, which is no small thing, because just a little story about that. You know, when you talk about roads that are being built and stuff, oftentimes some of that has to do with what the government's policy is, and sometimes it has to do with consumer demand. I don't know if you guys have been to Los Angeles lately. Los Angeles is like a car capital, isn't it? It's pretty much smoggy. You've got lots of freeways all over the place. I mean, Fresno is kind of turning into Los Angeles. It's like Frangeles, you know. It's crazy. The point I'm trying to make is, at the beginning of the 1920s, before the cars were being basically produced and they were making a lot of these roads, the city of Los Angeles actually invested money to build a streetcar system, and so did Fresno too. We had a huge streetcar system that transported people, like say from downtown to points, you know, around, to the Tower District, even to down even Huntington Boulevard and stuff like that. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but once the car came into existence, the oil companies tried to basically kill those streetcars and the streetcar systems so that they could have people buy more cars to promote gasoline use and to promote the oil industry and stuff. So you got to wonder if the age of the automobile was really driven by, I don't know, oil money, you know. So, but that's kind of what happened in California as well as some other places. But how different would Fresno and Los Angeles be if maybe the oil companies hadn't have had their way to promote, to get the government to pass these laws to build more roads and stuff. In the 20s, we do have a problem with agriculture. One of the things that's really starting to happen is this phenomenon in the 1920s in the middle of the United States, which is going to be even worse in the 1930s. It's called the Dust Bowl. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before. Yes, the Dust Bowl is basically bad weather combined with, you know, drought, I guess you could say, and for farmers, they're experiencing not the prosperity that everybody else is during the 1920s. So out of the one group that's really struggling to make ends meet due to the Dust Bowl, due to bad weather, and also a European economy that's a little bit shaky, because of Germany being in the situation it is after World War I and stuff like that. You do have agriculture farmers that are really, really struggling throughout the 1920s. So I guess manufacturing's doing good, ag is not doing so hot. And also for the average worker, wages are very, very stagnant and not very high. In fact, in a couple seconds, not in a couple seconds, but I don't actually have the graph. But one of the things that starts to happen in the 1920s is that the wages for an average American worker stay the same, while the millionaires and the wealthiest, their incomes go up like mad. And part of that is just because, well, first of all, there's no minimum wage, so workers are being exploited like crazy. And also, very wealthy people are benefiting from tax policies that are allowing them to keep more of their money and to generate more and more wealth, I guess you could say. And so there's just a lot going on here with the economics of the 1920s. So prosperous, I guess it depends on who you are. Just to show you a little bit about agricultural depression, and I'm sorry that thing is blocking that. One of the things that we're seeing, that should say sharp decline in farm incomes. And let's just take a look at what's going on. So we've got the end of World War I here, and all throughout the 1920s, the exports of our of our agriculture begin to drop. And part of that has to do with the Dust Bowl, like we're not producing as much. But also part of that has to do with who we're selling to as well. As you guys know, I mean, we live in a global economy today, and we did back then. And there are some other countries that traditionally we had sold to that are doing pretty badly in the 1920s. One of those countries is Germany. I don't know if you guys know what happened to Germany at the end of World War I. They really got punished by this thing called the Treaty of Versailles. You know, like they couldn't have a standing army that was so big, they couldn't defend themselves. They got territory taken away, and then they had this huge war debt. And when that happened, that kind of hurts their ability to purchase things. And so that might account for a lot of this, as well as the Dust Bowl. So farmers, they're seeing their incomes start to dip, especially right after the end of World War I. Notice how during the war is good, I guess, depending on who you are and how much you're producing. But if you look at that, war is pretty good for farmers, but not so much during the 1920s. These are just some pictures of farmers I would say during the Great Depression, but that's actually next week. And so there is a time where farmers are doing pretty good, 1925 to 1927, a little bit of a spike there. But then later on in the 1920s and the 30s, and once the Depression really hits right here, then it's really bad. And then they all have to come to California, right? And then they all end up in Clovis. I'm sorry. I'm a Fresman. For you Clovis people, I'll talk a little slow or... No, I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. So anyways, that's kind of the gloom and doom of the 20s there. Sorry about the Clovis jokes. So social and cultural aspects of the 20s. This is the part of history I really like. I like just learning about the people and all of this kind of thing that it's called social history. I'm into that. I don't know why. Maybe I'm weird. I don't know. But so many things happening in the video. One of the key points is that on Monday, if you weren't here with us, one of the things we learned is that people are buying things like crazy because of a new concept called credit. 75% of things bought in the United States back in the day, in the 1920s, are bought on credit. And it hasn't stopped. Everybody's buying stuff on credit now. I mean, I think the average credit card debt for an American family is like $7,000 or something like that, revolving like credit every month. Not my family though, because we pay it off. But $7,000, that's a lot of money. But it all kind of starts in the 1920s, you know. And what are people buying? They're buying cool stuff. Cool stuff. Stuff like this. This is an R2-D2 unit. No, this is a washing machine. You know, for the first time, an electrified washing machine. And one of the things we learned in the 1920s on Monday on the video is that America becomes more than ever electrified in the 1920s. So you have all these appliances for the first time that are being offered by familiar stores that you guys might know about. Like, for example, Sears. It was like business was big in the 1920s for Sears. There was another company called Woolworths, which we actually used to have one in Fresno. It's gone now. But department stores start selling stuff and marketing things to everybody, and to the middle class family, I guess you could say. And people, maybe their wages aren't too high, so they get the credit. So washing machines. The gas range, to actually cook things. This was a popular home item. Drills, Black & Decker, for example. That is one mighty drill, I must say. You need two people to at least hold that one. That's an electrified refrigerator. That's one of the first models, actually. You see this kind of compressor up here. And I'm no expert in refrigerator science, but I can tell you this. That did a lot more cooling than an actual just regular ice box did with